And now, live from the Daniel Scappin Studio, deep in the foothills of the North Georgia mountains, it's Mike Malloy.
Hey everybody, Mike Malloy here. Indeed, thank you very much for tuning in to this little old podcast. Got an email from somebody last night that said there was some kind of a screw up in the podcast lab. Really? Gosh, that never happens, does it? A screw up in the Malloy podcast? You mean in the delivery of it? Well, let's hope whatever it was, it doesn't happen again. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. It is Wednesday. It is the 22nd of May, 2024. And as we used to say back in the day, hell's a-poppin'. Boy, there's so much going on that carries with it each of these instances the potential for some real bad shit happening. You know what I'm saying? Oy, it's just, I don't know where to begin some days. How about with this? Norway and Spain and Ireland said early today, Wednesday, that they are going to recognize a Palestinian state. Now, what is something that should get our attention? All three of those countries are part of the NATO defense alliance. There are already 140 countries who recognize a Palestinian state. What the hell are they using for the boundaries of a Palestinian state? That would be the question that I would have. But anyway, so the announcement was made early this morning, and immediately Netanyahu lost his mind. According to the Washington Post, Israel was infuriated. Now, when they say Israel, I'm sure what they mean in the reporting is that Netanyahu and his so-called war cabinet were infuriated. So in response to Norway, Spain, and Ireland saying they're going to recognize the Palestinian state, Israel immediately recalled the ambassadors from Israel to those three countries. Now, the move is symbolic. There is nothing to recognize right now because there is no Palestinian state to begin with. That's obvious. So it is symbolic. But the countries involved, these three, said they hoped the recognition would further work toward a two-state solution. There's something that I think most of us know or should know. And I say this because I have been paying attention to Israel-Palestine, seriously paying attention for the last 50 years. I really have. Especially the last 35 years when I've been working in media. But I can tell you this, it's based on observation. It's based on listening to what I hear coming from Israelis and Palestinians. There will not be a two-state solution. It is impossible. The Israelis would never agree to a two-state solution unless, unless whatever part would be considered the Palestinian state would be separate from whatever would be considered the state of Israel by a 2,000 or 3,000 foot high wall, especially after what happened on October 7th, as far as the Israelis are concerned. This is not going to happen. It's way too late for this. David Ben-Gurion, when the state of Israel was formed, I think it was Ben-Gurion who made the statements about it was going to be democracy. The rights of the Palestinian would be acknowledged, recognized, and respected. And that has never happened. Not once. But there's a couple things we need to know, we Americans. Because after all, our president keeps talking about a two-state solution. And it's been Biden's position for the 50 years he's been in Washington. But again, it's not going to happen. And I don't say that to be an asshole or to say I'm going to offer up negative comments about it. It's simply not going to happen. And if you're listening to this podcast, I think you can fully agree. If you have any awareness at all of the 75-year-long history between the Israelis and the Palestinians, you know it's impossible. But there are 140 countries that recognize a Palestinian state. And again, it's recognizing the potential, I guess, of a Palestinian state. That's according to a list included in a letter last month to the UN. The letter came from Arab and Muslim states. Now, many of the countries, including China, India, Malaysia, Russia, they all moved to recognize a Palestinian state a long time ago, almost 40 years ago, 1988. That's when the Palestine National Council declared that they were henceforth and here on an independent state of Palestine. Mexico, according to the Washington Post, Mexico was the latest nation to recognize a Palestinian state, doing so June a year ago, 2023. And other recent recognitions include Sweden in 2014, Thailand in 2012, Brazil in 2011. So why are Spain, Norway, and Ireland making this announcement and moving to recognize the Palestinian state now? They said, the leaders of these three countries said their decision to recognize the Palestinian state were an effort to try to work toward a two-state solution. And again, how in God's name, so to speak, would that ever happen? I don't think it would. The Norwegian Prime Minister said, quote, "In the midst of war with tens of thousands killed and injured, we must keep alive the only alternative that offers a political solution for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Two states living side by side in peace and security." After this war, after what the Israeli military has done to the citizens, the peaceful citizens, Palestinian citizens of Gaza, what kind of a moron would say that these two peoples are going to live side by side peacefully? Come on. I pointed out, and you don't have to be an expert on Israeli-Palestinian issues to have pointed this out yourself. But after what has happened with 40,000 people, almost all of them civilians, butchered, blown to pieces, their villages and towns turned to rubble like something out of Germany in World War II or Tokyo in World War II. I mean, the whole goddamn section of Gaza is just one huge state of rubble. There's nothing, no education, no health care, no medical facilities, no government, no water, no sewer. And the Palestinians are going to say, oh, okay, all is forgiven. All is forgiven. We're going to be buddy-buddy now with the Israelis. And the Israelis are going to say, okay, look, the slaughter that you committed against our people on October 7th last year, the worst since the Holocaust, we forgive. Are you kidding? The Irish foreign minister said that his government's recognition would take place in, 6 days, May the 28th. In his statement, the Irish foreign minister said, quote, "The Palestinian people's right to self-determination, peace, dignity, and statehood must be vindicated," end quote. He added this, quote, "It is past time for Palestine to take its place among the nations of the world." And he added that with the war raging in Gaza, quote, "only a political track can deliver a permanent end to the violence," end quote. Oh, God. This is an issue that's one of these intractable issues, and there are many facing the human species all over the world. This is the one that we focus most on, though, Israel-Palestine, where it concerns this type of issue. Now, after this announcement came from these three countries, Norway, Spain, and Ireland, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority welcomed the announcement. Of course, the announcement by these three countries pissed off Israel mightily. And from a PR standpoint, of course it would. The Israeli foreign minister said he was recalling Israel's ambassadors to Spain, Norway, and Ireland, and that Israel, quote, will not remain silent in the face of those undermining its sovereignty and endangering its security, end quote. Well, yeah, I understand what the Israeli foreign minister is saying with that, but I don't get the impression that any of these countries are trying to undermine the sovereignty of Israel. They're trying to recognize the absolute necessity, long gone, of a two-state solution. Now, the U.S., for our point of view, has been for decades a two-state solution. But the U.S. rejects the idea that a Palestinian state should be recognized unilaterally, meaning without the cooperation and participation in the state of Israel. But that's not going to happen. There is never going to be that kind of cooperation. It is now, while it might have been difficult prior to this horror that's going on in that part of the world since last October, now it is impossible. As I've pointed out, many people have pointed out who have been watching this development, what the Israelis have created is another 2 or 3, possibly 4 generations of people now who will survive this horror in Gaza, who will dedicate their lives to destroying Israel. I mean, what are you going to do? What would you do? Seriously, I've tried so hard in my own little personal life to try to recognize the necessity of both these peoples having something that they call a homeland or a state. And I can't do it anymore. I can't. It's an intractable situation. But in trying to understand that, what would you do if you were Palestinian after what you have witnessed for the past 6 months? And not just that, if you were Palestinian, what would you do knowing that your grandparents in 1946 and 47 and 48 were told to die or get the fuck off the land that these Palestinian people, these old people, have considered to be their land for millennia? What would you do?
Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.